Mark had always enjoyed the quiet solitude of his room on the station. It was the perfect space for him to escape the hustle and bustle of daily duties, where he could relax after a long day of maintenance work. He loved his job, fixing things, troubleshooting problems, but it was the quiet, the stillness, that he appreciated most. It was late after his shift had ended, and Mark was sprawled out on his bed, reading a book. The soft hum of the station systems was a comforting background noise as he got lost in the pages. He was just about to turn the page when a sudden, sharp sound made him jump. The door to his room slid open. Mark didn't even have time to react before a figure stepped inside, a tall, imposing woman. She had a presence that immediately filled the space. Her skin was a deep, rich shade of blue, her eyes glowing a bright yellow that reminded him of a summer sun. She was wearing dark, sleek armor that clung to her form, and she moved with the grace of someone accustomed to both power and control. Mark blinked, trying to make sense of what was happening. Can I help you?" he asked, sitting up straight on the bed, suddenly aware of how strange the situation was. The woman didn't answer right away. She stood still for a moment, studying him with an intense gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then, finally, she spoke. "Human, can you destroy me?" The words were clear and sharp, like they had been rehearsed. Mark froze, blinking in confusion. What?" She took a step closer, her boots echoing softly against the metal floor. There was a calmness about her, an aura of control, but there was also something about the way she spoke that made Mark's heart skip a beat. It wasn't a threat, it wasn't even a demand. It was a strange, almost vulnerable question. "Can you destroy me, human?" she repeated. "I've lived my life as a warrior trained to be strong and indestructible, but I have never known what it feels like to be broken. Can you destroy me, break through my defenses?" Mark blinked again, completely caught off guard. This woman, this alien, was asking him to do something he couldn't even comprehend. Why would anyone want that? Why would she want that? I don't think I can do that," Mark stammered, his mind racing. "I'm not sure what you mean. I'm a technician, not whatever it is you're asking for." The woman, whose name he still didn't know, took another step forward, her eyes never leaving his. "You misunderstand," she said, her voice softer now, almost as if she were explaining something to a child. "I don't want you to kill me, human. I want you to show me something I've never felt, vulnerability. I want to know if you, a human, have the ability to tear down what I've built inside me. I want to know if you can break me." Mark stared at her, his mind struggling to process what she was asking. She wasn't asking for a fight. She wasn't even threatening him. She was asking for something entirely different, something he hadn't expected from a warrior. She was asking for trust, for intimacy. "Why me?" Mark asked, his voice hesitant. "I mean, why are you asking me? There are probably thousands of other beings who could." "Because you're human," she interrupted, her voice firm and direct. "I've seen your kind, seen the way you approach things with a level of care, compassion, and understanding that my people have lost. You think differently, and that's why I chose you." Mark didn't know what to say. He didn't know how to respond to such an unexpected request. He had fixed machines, systems, and even broken equipment. But breaking a person, emotionally, psychologically, was an entirely different thing. The silence between them stretched, the weight of her question hanging in the air. Mark couldn't ignore it. "Are you asking me to help you?" he asked carefully, trying to wrap his head around it. The woman's eyes softened, the intensity in her gaze flickering just slightly. "Yes, I want to be broken. I want to feel something other than this. Emptiness. I want to feel what it's like to be truly vulnerable, to trust someone completely." Mark stood up from the bed, moving slowly, carefully, as though walking through an unfamiliar landscape. He didn't know if he could help her, or if he even knew how. But something about the raw honesty in her eyes, the vulnerability she was showing despite her tough exterior, made his heart ache. He didn't know how to break through the walls she had built, but he knew one thing for sure: he wouldn't do it alone. I can't promise you that I'll destroy you, Mark said, his voice steady now, but I'll help you. If you want to let go, if you want to feel something more, then I'm here. The alien woman's gaze softened, and a small, almost imperceptible smile tugged at the corner of her lips. Then let us begin, she said quietly. And in that moment, Mark knew that whatever came next, he wasn't facing it alone. Together, they would navigate this strange, unexpected journey, one step at a time. The following days on the station felt like they were drifting through a dream. Mark couldn't stop thinking about the alien woman who had stepped into his room that night, her intense eyes, her strength, and that strange request. She wanted him to destroy her, break down her defenses, make her vulnerable. At first, Mark had been overwhelmed by the weight of her words. He wasn't sure how to even begin understanding someone like her, someone who had lived her entire life as a warrior, a force of nature. She wasn't like any of the other beings he had met in his time on the station. She was both terrifying and fascinating, and her quiet vulnerability was something Mark had never expected. The next time they met, it was in the station's central lounge. Mark had been there for a quick meal, sitting alone at a table when the doors slid open, and she stepped inside, her presence filling the room immediately. She didn't wear her armor today. Instead, she wore a simple, flowing tunic that did little to mask her toned frame, and her hair was pulled back loosely, the strands falling like dark waves down her back. For the first time, Mark noticed how human she looked, almost delicate, despite the fierce energy that radiated from her. "Mind if I sit?" she asked, her voice calm, though Mark could hear a trace of uncertainty beneath the smooth tones. Mark looked up, smiling despite the knot in his stomach. "Not at all. It's good to see you again, She smiled softly. "Lyra," she said, sitting down across from him, "I've been thinking about our conversation. I'm sorry if I confused you with my request." Mark shook his head, his hands resting on the table. "No need to apologize. You caught me off guard, but I'm not sure I fully understand what you meant. I mean, why would you want someone to break down your walls? That doesn't sound like something a warrior would ask." Lyra's eyes flickered with something unreadable, and for a moment she was silent. Then she spoke, her voice softer. "I've lived a life full of battles, of victory and loss, but through it all I've kept my emotions buried, hidden away behind armor, both literal and emotional. And now I want to know what it's like to feel something more. I want to know what it's like to be human." Mark couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. There was something so raw in her words, something vulnerable. He had never seen a warrior like her, someone so powerful, yet longing for something as simple as the ability to feel. "I don't know if I can give you that," Mark said quietly, looking into her eyes. "I'm just a guy who fixes things, but if you want to talk about it, I'm happy to listen." Lyra studied him for a long moment, and then, as if deciding something in her mind, she leaned forward slightly. "Maybe that's where I start," she said softly, "with talking." They spent the next few hours talking about everything and nothing. Lyra spoke of her home, Thon, a planet of war and honor. She told Mark of the countless battles she had fought in, of the victories and the loneliness that followed. Her voice was steady, but Mark could hear the faint crack of emotion beneath it, the cracks in her armor that she was too proud to show anyone. As she spoke, Mark listened carefully, not just to her words, but to the emotions behind them. He began to understand that Lyra wasn't just asking for someone to break her. She was asking for someone to help her discover a side of herself she had buried for too long. She was asking for trust, something she had never given to anyone else. When she finished, Mark took a deep breath. I think I understand now. You don't want to be a warrior forever. You want more than just the battles, the victories, and the pain. You want to know what it's like to feel real." Lyra nodded, her golden eyes soft. "Yes, but I don't know how to stop being what I've always been. It's all I know." Mark smiled gently, leaning back in his chair. "It's okay not to know, and you don't have to do it alone. We'll figure it out, one step at a time." Lyra's lips curled into a small smile, but there was something different about it this time. It wasn't the playful, almost teasing smile she had worn when she first arrived. This was softer, more open. "You make it sound easy, human," she said, her voice laced with a mixture of admiration and doubt. "But I've been running from who I really am for so long. I don't know if I can face it." Mark stood up, walking around the table to her side. He didn't say anything for a moment, just reached out and gently took her hand in his. The touch was simple, but it spoke volumes. He wasn't offering her solutions or grand promises. He was offering her something real, his presence, his support. "You don't have to run anymore, Lyra," he said softly, looking into her eyes. "Not from yourself, and not from me." Her breath caught, and for a second Mark thought she might pull away. But instead, she held his gaze, her hand squeezing his gently. "Thank you, Mark," she whispered. I think I'm ready to take that step with you." And in that moment, Mark knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together. Slowly but surely, Lyra was beginning to let go of her armor, and Mark was there, ready to help her discover a new kind of strength, one built not on fighting but on trust. The days that followed were filled with a sense of anticipation that Mark hadn't expected. He had never imagined that his quiet life on the station would take such a turn. Every time he saw Lyra, it was like something new was unfolding between them. The alien warrior who had once seemed so untouchable and distant now felt more like someone he could relate to, someone he could connect with. Mark spent the next few days helping her with small tasks around the station. She wasn't used to asking for help, but Mark noticed that she was starting to trust him more with each passing day. They worked side by side, not saying much, but the quiet companionship was enough. It wasn't about the tasks anymore. It was about the bond that was growing between them. One afternoon, after fixing some equipment together, they found themselves sitting in the small lounge on the station. The sun from a nearby planet cast soft shadows across the room, and the view of space outside the window was breathtaking. The vastness of it all made Mark feel both small and incredibly lucky at the same time. And in that moment, as they sat together, he realized how much he had come to care for her. "You've been quiet today," Mark said, breaking the comfortable silence between them. "Anything on your mind?" Lyra glanced over at him, her golden eyes flickering with something unreadable. She was still a warrior at heart, but there was a softness in her gaze now that Mark hadn't seen before. "I'm not used to sharing everything," she admitted. "I've spent so much time hiding behind walls of strength, of pride. I don't know how to let them down." Mark leaned forward slightly, his elbows resting on his knees. "You don't have to do it all at once, Lyra. You're not alone in this anymore. You've got me." For a moment she didn't say anything, her eyes searching his face as if looking for something. Mark waited, not pushing her, just being there. "I know," she said softly, her voice almost a whisper. "But it's not easy. I've spent so many years building walls, and now I don't know who I'd be without them." Mark smiled gently, reaching out to place a hand on hers. "You'd be you," he said simply, "the person you've always been, and I'll be here to help you find that person again." Lyra turned her hand over, allowing their fingers to intertwine. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a quiet promise. She looked down at their hands, then back at Mark, a soft smile curving her lips. "You make it sound so simple," she said, her voice tinged with a hint of warmth. "But I think I'm starting to believe you." Mark's heart swelled at her words. "It can be simple, Lyra. It's about taking the first step and then the next, one at a time." She looked at him, her expression still thoughtful, but now there was something more in her eyes, a glimmer of hope, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in a long time. "You're right," she said quietly, her gaze softening. "I'm just not used to feeling this, vulnerable, but maybe that's what I need." Mark leaned back in his chair, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "You've been through so much, Lyra. You've earned the right to feel, and you don't have to do it alone." She nodded slowly, her fingers tightening around his. I know, and maybe I don't need to be so afraid of it anymore. The weight of her words hung in the air between them, but it wasn't a heavy weight. It felt like the start of something new, something they were both learning to navigate together. As the conversation drifted from their pasts to more light-hearted topics, Mark realized how easy it was to talk to her now. The walls she had built, though still present, were beginning to show cracks, and he could see it in her eyes. She was letting go, little by little. At that moment, Lyra stood up, stretching her arms above her head with a relaxed sigh. I never thought I'd be able to do this, to just sit and talk about feelings. Mark laughed softly, getting up to stand beside her. Well, you're doing great. I'm not going anywhere, Lyra. Take your time. She turned to face him, her eyes glinting with a new kind of playfulness. I think I'm starting to like this, she said, her voice teasing. Talking, being human. Mark grinned. I'm glad. You're more human than you think. For the first time, Lyra smiled, really smiled. It wasn't the hard, determined smile of a warrior. It was softer, more genuine, and it made Mark's heart race just a little. You know, human, she said, her smile growing. I think you might just be the one to help me find out what it's like to live again. Mark's heart skipped a beat. I'd be honored. For a moment they stood there, eyes locked, an unspoken understanding passing between them. They weren't there yet, not by a long shot. There were still walls to break down, still obstacles to face, but with every step they were getting closer to something real. Shall we get some dinner? Mark asked, breaking the silence with a grin. I'm starving. Lyra's laugh filled the room, warm and light. Sounds perfect. And as they walked toward the door together, Mark realized that the quiet moments, the moments of shared understanding, were the ones that mattered most. In those moments, everything felt right, and with Lyra by his side, he knew that they could face whatever the universe threw at them, one step at a time. The following days on the station seemed to carry a new energy, one that neither Mark nor Lyra had expected but both were grateful for. Their connection had deepened in ways that neither of them had anticipated. Each conversation, each shared look, felt more meaningful than the last. Mark was beginning to realize that there was something more to Lyra than just the warrior who had first stepped into his room. She was learning to trust him, and he was learning to open up to her in ways he never thought possible. Today was no different. They were once again in the station's observation deck, standing side by side looking out at the stars. The view was breathtaking as always, but today there was something different about it. Lyra stood a little closer to Mark, her arm brushing against his every now and then. It was the small, subtle moments like these that made his heart race, these simple, unspoken gestures that spoke volumes. I never really got a chance to look at the stars before, Lyra said quietly, her voice softer than usual. I was always too busy fighting, too busy running. Mark glanced over at her, surprised by her words. Fighting, running. It sounds exhausting. She nodded, her eyes still fixed on the stars outside. It was, but that's the only life I knew. I never allowed myself to look at anything outside of that, and now, I don't know what to do with all this space, all this peace. Mark smiled, understanding what she meant. It's strange at first, isn't it? But you don't have to keep running anymore, Lyra. You can stop, take a breath, let yourself just be. She turned to face him then, her golden eyes meeting his with a sincerity he hadn't seen before. For a moment, the usual intensity in her gaze softened, replaced by something more vulnerable. I'm not used to being still, she admitted. But when I'm with you, it's easier. You make it easier. Mark felt his heart beat a little faster at her words. He didn't know if it was the vulnerability in her voice, or the way she looked at him like he was the one who had been helping her all along, but it made him feel more connected to her than ever before. You don't have to carry everything by yourself, Mark said gently, his voice full of warmth. I'm here. You don't have to keep pretending to be the strong, invincible warrior. You can be human with me, vulnerable, weak even if you need to be. Lyra laughed softly, but there was no sarcasm in her voice, just a genuine sense of relief. I don't know if I can ever be weak, Mark, but I'm starting to think that maybe. Maybe I don't have to be strong all the time, not with you. Mark smiled, his hand brushing against hers as he stepped a little closer. You don't have to be anything except you. For a moment there was silence, and then Lyra took a deep breath, as if making a decision in her mind. She turned fully toward him, her eyes steady. I think I'm ready to face who I really am, to stop hiding behind my strength. Mark's heart surged with pride and he reached out to touch her shoulder gently. I'm proud of you, Lyra, but you don't have to do it all at once. Take it one step at a time. She smiled at him, the same soft smile from before, the one that was no longer hidden behind walls or armor. One step at a time, she repeated, her voice steady and sure. I can do that. Without thinking, Mark reached out and brushed a lock of her hair behind her ear. The motion was simple, but it felt like an intimate gesture, a small, tender act that made his heart swell with affection. Lyra's breath caught at the touch, and for a moment the world around them seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, standing under the stars, learning to navigate this strange new space between them. And then, as if pulled by some invisible force, they leaned toward each other. Mark's lips met hers in a soft, hesitant kiss. It was gentle at first, as if they were both testing the waters, feeling the unspoken connection that had grown between them. But as the kiss deepened, as the warmth between them intensified, it felt like more than just a moment of attraction. It felt like a promise. When they finally pulled away, neither of them spoke right away. They simply stood there, hands still lightly touching, their foreheads resting against each other. There was no need for words. What they shared in that moment was more than enough. Lyra broke the silence first, her voice barely above a whisper. I think I'm starting to believe in this, in us. Mark smiled, his chest swelling with something he couldn't quite name. I believe in us too, Lyra. We'll take it one step at a time together. And just like that, Mark knew that no matter what came next, he wasn't afraid. With Lyra by his side, he felt ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. Together, they would break down the walls, piece by piece, and find something real, something worth fighting for. The stars outside shone brighter than ever before. The next few days on the station felt like they had entered a new chapter of their journey. Mark and Lyra had started something, a bond that neither of them fully understood but both were committed to exploring. There was a quiet intimacy between them now, little glances shared, the occasional brush of hands, and a sense of peace that Mark hadn't felt in a long time. Lyra was no longer just the fierce warrior from R.H. Thon. She was more than that now, someone learning how to embrace the parts of herself she had buried for so long. And Mark, he had never imagined that his quiet life aboard the station would turn into something so meaningful, so filled with unexpected moments. That afternoon, after a long shift of repairing station equipment, Mark found himself walking toward the observation deck. The station was peaceful, the hum of the systems in the background as always. But today, Mark was feeling restless, eager to see Lyra, to talk to her. It was the small things now, the way her smile made his heart flutter, the way her laughter had started to feel like home. He stepped into the observation deck, and there she was, standing by the window, her eyes fixed on the stars outside. The light from the station bathed her in a soft glow, and Mark felt that familiar rush of warmth when he saw her. Hey, he said, walking up beside her. You're always here when I come looking for you. Lyra turned toward him, her eyes lighting up when she saw him. And I'll always be here, she replied, a soft smile playing on her lips. Sometimes the stars are the only thing that makes sense to me. They remind me that there's more out there, more than what I've been through. Mark leaned against the railing beside her, his gaze shifting to the stars as well. You know, I think I'm starting to understand what you mean. The stars. They make everything feel smaller, more manageable. Like no matter what happens, there's something bigger out there, something we can't control. It makes the little things seem less important. Lyra glanced at him, her golden eyes narrowing slightly. "You're right. I've spent so long thinking that I had to control everything, that my purpose was to fight and win. But when I'm with you, it feels like I don't need to be that person anymore." Mark turned to look at her, his chest tightening with emotion. He had never expected this, to be the one who helped her find peace, to be the one she trusted with something so vulnerable. "You don't have to be that person, Lyra," he said softly. "You can just be you, the woman who wants to feel something real, the woman who deserves to be seen for more than just her strength." Lyra's lips parted as she looked at him, her breath catching for a moment. There was a vulnerability in her gaze that Mark hadn't seen before, something raw and unspoken. "I'm starting to believe that," she whispered. "And I'm starting to believe that I can let go of everything I've held onto. But it's hard. It's like trying to walk in a world where everything is new." Mark smiled, reaching out and gently taking her hand in his. "It's okay to take it slow," he said, his voice full of reassurance. "We're both learning this together, and it doesn't have to be perfect. We'll figure it out one step at a time." Lyra's gaze softened as she squeezed his hand. "One step at a time," she echoed, her voice steady now, like she was trying to believe in the words she said. Mark nodded, feeling a sense of contentment wash over him. He hadn't expected this. He hadn't expected to become so connected to her, to care for her in this way. But now, standing here with her hand in his, he knew there was no going back. Whatever they were, whatever was happening between them, it felt right. "Mark," Lyra said, her voice breaking the comfortable silence between them, "I want to take a chance. I want to let go of the walls I've built. But I'm scared. I'm scared of what might happen if I let myself feel too much." Mark stepped closer, gently pulling her into his arms. He could feel the tension in her body, the uncertainty that lingered, but he also felt her trust in him. "It's okay to be scared," he whispered into her hair. "I'll be here, Lyra. You don't have to do it alone." She slowly pulled away, her eyes meeting his. There was a softness in her gaze now, a kind of quiet surrender that made Mark's heart race. Without another word, she leaned in, her lips brushing against his in a kiss that was full of promise. It wasn't a kiss of passion, not yet, but it was full of everything they had shared so far: trust, vulnerability, and the hope that they were both ready to take this step forward together. When they finally pulled away, Lyra smiled, a small but genuine smile that made Mark's chest swell with emotion. "I think I'm ready," she said softly, "to take that step with you." Mark grinned, feeling like the weight of the world had just been lifted off his shoulders. "I think we both are." And with that, they stood together, side by side, staring out at the stars. There were still challenges ahead, there always would be, but in this moment, with Lyra by his side, Mark knew they could face anything. Together. The days on the station continued to pass by, each one marked by small moments that made Mark feel more connected to Lyra. Their bond, once fragile and uncertain, had grown into something deeper, something real. Mark wasn't sure when the transition had happened, when the easy companionship had shifted into something more. But now, every glance, every shared laugh, felt like a step toward something neither of them could fully explain. They had found comfort in each other's presence, a kind of peace that was unexpected but welcome. Lyra had slowly started to open up to him, and every time she did, Mark felt a little more certain that he was the one she had been waiting for, someone who could help her let go of the warrior she had been for so long. One evening, after finishing a long day of repairs and maintenance, Mark found himself walking through the quiet halls of the station, lost in thought. He hadn't seen Lyra all day, and he couldn't help but feel that familiar ache in his chest whenever they were apart. The thought of her made everything feel brighter, like he was looking at the world through a new lens. As he rounded a corner, he saw her standing at the end of the hall, her back turned to him as she gazed out of one of the station's windows. The light from the nearby stars bathed her in a soft glow, and for a moment, Mark simply stood there, watching her. She had become more than just a person to him. She was a force, strong, beautiful, and full of complexity. He took a deep breath and walked toward her, his footsteps quiet against the metal floor. When he reached her, he stood beside her, just watching the stars for a few moments. Neither of them spoke, but the silence was comfortable. It was the kind of quiet that only came when two people were completely in sync with one another. "You're always here when I need to clear my head," Mark said softly, his voice breaking the silence. Lyra turned toward him, a faint smile tugging at her lips. "And you're always here when I need to feel grounded," she replied, her voice steady but warm. Mark's heart fluttered at her words. "I guess we make a good team, huh?" Lyra laughed, the sound light and easy. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think you might be right." They stood there for a moment, the stars outside twinkling like diamonds, casting a soft light over them. It felt like the universe was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next between them. "Mark," Lyra said suddenly, her tone quieter, more serious, "there's something I need to tell you." Mark turned to face her fully, his heart picking up its pace. "What is it?" She took a deep breath, her eyes looking deep into his as though searching for something. "I'm scared. Scared that this, whatever this is between us, won't be enough. That I'll fall back into the same patterns I've always known. That I won't be able to stop fighting. I don't know how to be something other than what I've been trained to be." Mark reached out and gently took her hand, his thumb brushing across her skin. "You don't have to fight anymore, Lyra. Not with me. Not here." Her eyes flickered with uncertainty, and for a moment she looked away, as though the weight of her fears was too much to carry. But then she looked back at him, and Mark could see the vulnerability there, something raw and real, something she had been hiding for so long. "I've never trusted anyone like this," Lyra whispered, her voice breaking just a little. "I've always kept everyone at arm's length because I thought if I didn't, I would lose myself. But with you, I don't feel like I'm losing anything. I feel like I'm finally starting to find something I've been missing." Mark's heart swelled with emotion. He had always known that Lyra was strong, but hearing her admit her fears, her vulnerabilities, made him want to protect her more than ever. He squeezed her hand gently, his voice soft but full of sincerity. "You don't have to lose yourself, Lyra," he said. "You don't have to be anything you're not. I'll be here with you through everything. All the mistakes, all the fears. We'll figure it out one step at a time, together." Lyra's breath caught and she stepped closer to him. "Together," she echoed, the word filled with new meaning. Before Mark could say anything else, she leaned in, her lips brushing softly against his. It was a gentle kiss, full of tenderness and understanding, a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through, everything they had learned about each other, and the promise of what was still to come. When they pulled away, Lyra rested her forehead against his, her breath warm against his skin. "I'm ready to take a chance, Mark," she said softly. "I don't know what the future holds, but I want to face it with you." Mark's heart beat faster and he smiled, his arms wrapping around her. "You don't have to know what the future holds. We'll take it one day at a time, together." They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, looking out at the stars. The future was uncertain, and there were still fears to face, but in that moment Mark knew that whatever happened next, they would face it side by side. And that was enough. The days had passed in a comfortable blur, each one bringing Mark and Lyra closer, a little at a time. The space station, once a cold, sterile place to Mark, now felt like home when she was with him. Lyra, too, seemed to be letting go of the heavy armor she had worn her whole life, both the literal and metaphorical kind. It wasn't easy. There were still moments when she pulled back, unsure of herself or the emotions she was learning to navigate. But Mark was patient. He never pushed. He just let her take things at her own pace. It was a slow, steady progress, but it was real. They were moving forward together. Today, however, felt different. The air was thick with anticipation. There was a spark between them, something neither could ignore anymore, and Mark could feel it growing. It had been weeks since that first kiss, and though they had spent many quiet moments together, there had been no further words, no actions to acknowledge what had happened. He knew they had both been holding back, but now it was time to take the next step. Mark found Lyra in the observation deck again, just as he had so many times before. She was standing by the window, her back to him, staring out at the stars, her long dark hair flowing gently with the station's air currents. The sight of her, so peaceful and vulnerable, stirred something deep inside him. Without thinking, Mark walked over to her. He didn't want to stand back anymore, didn't want to wait for some perfect moment that might never come. They had taken small steps together, but now it was time for something bigger. "Lyra," he called softly, his voice steady but filled with the emotions he had been carrying for weeks. She turned, her golden eyes locking with his. "Mark," she said, her voice a little breathless, as though she had been waiting for this moment too. "Can we talk?" he asked, his heart racing. "I need to know where we're headed. I can't keep pretending like I don't feel something." Lyra's eyes softened and she stepped closer, her face just inches from his. "You're not the only one, Mark. I've been trying to figure it out too. I'm scared, but I'm ready to let go of the fear." Mark reached out and gently touched her cheek, his thumb brushing over her soft skin. "Then let's stop holding back. Let's take the leap, Lyra. Whatever happens, we face it together." Lyra looked up at him, her breath catching in her throat. It wasn't just the words. It was the way he said them with so much sincerity, with a strength that felt like it could break through anything. She felt something inside her stir, a soft warmth that she hadn't allowed herself to feel for a long time. She had always thought that being strong meant keeping her distance, keeping her emotions locked away. But now, standing here looking at Mark, she realized that real strength wasn't about shutting everything out. It was about allowing herself to trust, to love, and to be loved in return. "I've never been good at this," she admitted, her voice quiet but steady. "At letting someone in, at letting myself feel vulnerable." Mark smiled, stepping closer until there was no space left between them. "You don't have to be perfect, Lyra. You just have to be you, and I'll be right here." There was no hesitation in her now. No more walls. Lyra reached up, her hand cupping the side of his face, and she pulled him into a kiss. It was different this time, more than just a gentle exploration. It was a kiss that spoke of everything they had been through together, everything they had shared. There was a passion in it, a promise, and a depth that neither of them had expected to find in such a short time. When they pulled away, both of them were breathless, their hearts beating in sync. Lyra's smile was full of warmth and something deeper, something that Mark could only describe as belonging. "I never thought I could feel this way," she said softly, her voice thick with emotion. "But I do. I'm ready to let go of everything I've been holding onto. I'm ready to face whatever comes next, with you." Mark felt his heart swell. "You don't have to face it alone, not anymore. We're in this together." They stood there for a long moment, their hands still intertwined, the stars outside their only witness. It was like the whole universe had stopped for them, just for a moment, allowing them to take that leap together. The quiet of the room was broken only by the sound of their breathing, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. They didn't need to say anything more. They knew where they stood now, and for the first time, neither of them was afraid of the future. Mark gently pulled her closer, his arms wrapping around her in a tender embrace. "Whatever happens, Lyra, I'm not going anywhere. I'm here with you for however long you want me." She snuggled into his chest, resting her head against him, feeling his heartbeat under her ear. "And I'm here with you, Mark," she whispered. "I think I'm finally ready to believe in us." And with that, they stood together, surrounded by the stars, knowing that they had just taken the first step into a future neither of them had expected but both were eager to explore. A future full of possibilities, of love, and of learning to trust each other, one step at a time. The following days felt like a dream Mark had never dared to hope for. He and Lyra spent their time exploring the station together, talking, laughing, and sharing small moments that felt incredibly significant. Each day, their connection grew stronger, more natural, like two pieces of a puzzle falling into place. One evening, as they sat together under the stars, Lyra turned to Mark, her golden eyes full of emotion. "I never thought I'd be able to say this," she said quietly, "but I think I've found something I never even knew I was searching for." Mark smiled, his hand reaching for hers. "I think I've found it too, Lyra, you." She squeezed his hand, leaning her head on his shoulder. "I thought I was always meant to be alone, but now I realize that's not true. We can build something together, something real." Mark's heart swelled with happiness. They had both come so far, and now, standing here side by side, with the vastness of the stars before them, Mark knew there was no limit to what they could face together. Together they were unstoppable. And as the station hummed softly around them, they held onto that promise, one step at a time, through whatever came next.